How is it going today, guys? I'm out here for another walk and talk in one of my favorite cemeteries in all of Puerto Rico, and this is the old cemetery in Mayagüez on the west coast of the island. And I just wanted to kind of take you guys through it. The city of Mayagüez is one of the older cities in Puerto Rico, and it's definitely one of the richest cities, like historically and culturally. And this is the old cemetery. There's two newer cemeteries here, and as you guys know, I'm not so much as interested in the new cemeteries as I am these older cemeteries. There's just so much more history, obviously, in the older cemeteries, but I like the way they look a lot too. There's a lot of old, amazing headstones, and back in the day when they were putting this cemetery together, they kind of just went with the flow. And I noticed a lot of the newer cemeteries are much more organized and clean, but I hate to say it, they're a little more boring and they're just a little more basic. I think it's just because not only like new codes and laws and guidelines that the people that are running the cemeteries have to follow. It's not just that, it's just that people in our culture today just aren't as, excited about cemeteries anymore, and cemeteries just aren't as important in our culture anymore as they used to be, unfortunately. Back when cemeteries like this were made, it really meant something to have an elaborate tomb like this. And nowadays, what I notice is that people are just trying to get buried for as cheap as possible, even though it's still really expensive and you're not going to get around it. People are trying to get buried as cheaply as possible, and you're just not going to find amazing statues like this anymore. And then, because cemeteries like this are so much older, you can see the weather wear and whatnot, and it adds to it to me. I'm a big fan of the older cemeteries in Puerto Rico as opposed to the newer cemeteries. I'm not a fan of grass around here, I'll just put it that way. So I didn't spend much time in the two newer cemeteries in Mayagüez. I kind of spent most of my time in this cemetery here. They sure do a good job at maintaining and upkeeping this cemetery, though. I will say that. I don't think a big earthquake has hit Mayagüez for a while. I know in like 1917 or 1918 there was a big devastating earthquake that messed up Mayagüez pretty good, and I know Ponce has had a few earthquakes that were just devastating to the city. But the people of Puerto Rico are very resilient, and they recover and they turn things around, even though it takes time sometimes. There's just so much rich history in Mayagüez, both good and bad, light and dark, and this cemetery here really showcases that. I just love these old tombs. They're so amazing. So pretty. So photogenic. I would much rather be here than at any beach. I actually had an offer with a couple of my friends today to go to Steps Beach, which is one of the more popular beaches on the entire island, in my opinion, but I had to decline because I would rather be spending my day here walking around the cemetery. Mayagüez is a pretty big city here in the island of Puerto Rico. I'm guessing it's the third, maybe the fourth biggest city on the island. I'm not 100% sure. I know you got San Juan, and you got Arecibo, and you got Ponce, and they're all pretty large cities. But Mayagüez is up there too, so there's a lot of tombs here. And even the newer cemeteries are starting to get packed full. I've been wondering, I watched a video on YouTube last night that was called, "What are they doing with all the bodies in cemeteries in the world?" And it brought up a lot of interesting points, and I don't think this is going on in Puerto Rico yet, because every town seems to have a new cemetery that's growing and growing, and if they don't have a new cemetery, they have like additions that they're putting on to the older cemeteries. So I'm constantly seeing growth with the cemeteries and whatnot, but after a while, you really have to start asking, what are we really doing with all the bodies? And not just in Puerto Rico, but I'm just talking about the United States and all around the world. I know that we are moving largely towards cremation now, as opposed to the Catholic type burial system that we've been used to all these years. So I know that's playing a huge part in the cemeteries not completely overflowing yet too. But when you look at how many people you can fit into a cemetery per acre, and then you combine that with how many people are dying, even if, let's say, half of them or 2/3 of them are being cremated, the numbers still just aren't adding up. And the video is really interesting. The guy also brought up a point that one of the reasons why we're coming to these numbers is the fact that governments all over the world are lying about their populations. But there's actually a lot less people that are living on the planet right now than we are being told. And could be lots of reasons for that. There's a lot of rumors that like China doesn't have nearly the number of people that they claim, and that they do that just to strike fear in their adversaries. I mean, who wants to mess with a sophisticated country that has 1 billion people? But now if they only had 570 million, they might not seem as imposing, right? And then there's, as far as the United States goes, I know cities and states and municipalities get funding depending on how many people they have that are residents there. So it makes sense for like let's say the state of Washington, where I'm from, to say they have a population of 1.2 million, when really it's only 920,000, let's say. I'm just throwing numbers out there. But it wouldn't surprise me if the municipalities in Puerto Rico and the municipalities in the mainland US are actually fudging the numbers, and there's not as many people that are being born and dying as we are led to believe. Because after a while, you got to think, like, where are we going to keep burying people? You know, what's Puerto Rico going to do 100 years from now when there's a few, millions more people that they're going to have to inter into the cemeteries? And yes, like I said, even if half of them ultimately get cremated, I mean, eventually you're gonna run out of space. And I just wonder what the world's gonna do in about 100 years or so when we start like really running out of spaces in our cemeteries. Are we gonna just start doing a different kind of practice? Are we gonna go full on cremation and just make like little tombs? I mean, I was thinking about that the other day. What if people that got buried in the cemeteries from now on got cremated, and you just made like little tombs the size of shoe boxes to bury them? You can fit a lot more people in the cemetery if you did that, as opposed to the casket and concrete marble container that they are put in. But the problem with that is there's a lot of money to be lost if people aren't buying caskets and getting cremated and so on and so forth. So there's a huge economic problem that it can cause too. But like I said, over time, I just don't know what they're going to do in Puerto Rico, especially when the new cemeteries start filling up like this, which they are already. I mean, they're putting together new cemeteries, and I mean, they're filling up so fast. It's crazy. It's like I said, I visited one of the newer cemeteries here in Mayagüez, and geez, it's damn near full already. So just going to be interesting to see how us human beings handle our cemetery and death practices as time continues. Because I know the Catholic cremation thing that we've been doing, it's just definitely not sustainable. It's really not sustainable anywhere, not just in the Puerto Rican weather, but I mean, even in Europe, where these Catholic traditions, I guess you can say, could have originated from. We're just running out of room, you guys. I really like this tomb right here. I didn't pay much attention to it the last couple times I was here. But now that I'm not worried about documenting the whole cemetery, and I can just kind of walk around and relax a little bit more, I can just notice things a little bit better. That's why I like doing these walk and talks too, because I've already documented this cemetery a few times and filmed it, and I got hundreds of photographs, and now I can just relax and take a nice joyful walk around. And this is another interesting part of the cemetery here. Like I said, before they put together the new cemeteries, or the newer cemeteries in Mayagüez, this is an example of how they had to branch out a little bit. As you can see, the cemetery wall is right there, but they had to bury people out here and cut the weeds down and make a little bit more space because there just isn't any room on the other side of the wall. And that's just my guess. This could be a financial, economic thing as well. Maybe the people that are buried here were the people that couldn't afford to have headstones and be buried in the cemetery. So maybe this is the, what would you call it? In Washington, you'd call it the poor farmer side of the cemetery, if that makes any sense. But there's a couple little crosses along the wall here that go down, and everything's too wore out. Good luck finding out the names of these people, because the heat and the humidity and the jungle of Puerto Rico just swallows everything up and wears everything out. Can see who this is though, so let's check it out. Ramona Rosario. Looks like she passed away in 1966, so about 60 or so years ago. And you can see a cross poking out of the greenery there, and there may be tombs all along here too that have just been swallowed up by the sands of time. This is typical everywhere, not just in Puerto Rico. I've experienced some pretty interesting stuff like this in cemeteries in Washington too. There's just really only so much you can do, and I think for the most part the workers and the municipalities, they do a damn good job at these cemeteries considering all the adversity that they face. And I'm impressed. I think they did great keeping this cemetery up after all these years of getting beaten down by the weather and whatnot. I want to take you guys back down to where I started, because there's some really awesome statues down here. Some of my favorite in all of the island. Just love how this cemetery is set up too, with these nice walking paths. Everything's not completely smashed in. They made sure to just try to do the right thing. You know, they got drainage here. They got these nice paths. I mean, they missed out on a decent amount of money making sure this cemetery is nice and walkable for the people instead of just boxing everybody in. Look at all this space that could have tombs in it right here, just on this path. But they decided to focus on the beauty of the cemetery too, and I like that. That's one of my favorite things about this cemetery here in Mayagüez, is they wanted it to be nice when they made this cemetery. You could just tell. There's some people walking around right now, kind of where I want to go, and out of respect for them, because they may be mourning a loved one, I'm just going to go back this way for a minute, and we'll go back out and check out those awesome statues when we have a chance. This is another pretty one. Little baby angel, big old tomb. So what do you guys think? Are we just gonna have to start building up and stacking bodies 100 years from now? Because, you know, like I said, how many more can we fit in this cemetery? Maybe a couple thousand. You know, somebody can get cremated and then just get put in the tomb with their loved ones. So I mean, there's still room for growth in this cemetery. And then I wonder, like, what cemeteries do when they're finally full, because I mean, essentially they just become cost burdens to the city, right? You got this full cemetery that isn't gonna generate any more money buried, people, than it already has. But you still have to pay for the maintenance and upkeep of everything. Now, do these people rent the tombs here, or are they for life? Are they on 99-year leases and then they get removed and then the cemetery will sell that spot to a new family? There's just a lot of like technical things about the cemeteries here in Puerto Rico and in Washington, where I'm from, that I just don't know, and I really should get that information and make a video on it, because it's really important information when it comes to, you know, just cemetery life in general. Now I'm gonna walk back over there and we'll see if everybody's gone. When I'm walking around with my camera, I don't like filming other people because, I don't know, this just ain't the place to be messing around like that. Somebody could be here, you know, to visit their mother or something, and then you got some jerk off showing up and putting a camera in their face. I just can't do it. So anyways, this is one of my favorite statues in all of the island in Puerto Rico. You got the angel with the two children. Somebody put a really pretty artificial flower in between the legs of the child that just makes it even more awesome and just makes it pop. What a beautiful statue, am I right? It just makes me wonder who these people were. The Familia Balest. And they even have the interesting checkerboard bottom that's slowly starting to come apart after all these years. But who was this family? And where did they come on to their money? Because you don't get a headstone like this when you're just an average person. I'm sorry to say. The average person just gets a concrete cross, you know what I mean? But this family went all out. And again, that's what I like about these old cemeteries. People went all out back in the day. Unlike now. And people just aren't worried about this kind of stuff as much, and they just want to get everything done as cheap as possible, you know. And right across from one of my favorite statues in all the island is another one of my favorite statues in all of the island. Isn't that super freaking pretty? What an amazing statue. And again, I wonder whose does this belong to? And I can't quite tell because everything's so weather worn. I don't know what family got this tomb, but again, I have to assume that they were a people of prominence. Because they have such a nice burial plot, and that's kind of a way to judge, you know, how rich or poor someone was. A nice burial plot's like having a nice car, you know, and people took that kind of stuff seriously back in the early and mid 1800s and early and mid 1900s. This statue right here, is it just a decorative statue, or is this a family? again, I just can't quite tell, you guys. I just always wonder about some of these rich and prominent families. Were they Freemasons? Were they Illuminati? I mean, I've always been interested in that kind of stuff and questioned that kind of stuff. I know there's a lot of prominent historical figures buried here, mayors, founders of the city. Like Mr. Santos here, he had to have been somebody important. I mean, they carved his face into the stone. Look at how just freaking big his tomb is. This was just not a normal guy. That was somebody of importance, and I'm gonna do some research on it when I get home later today. It's my last day in Mayagüez, and I'm off to a different part of the island to do some more exploring. So I just wanted to do a walk and talk with you guys and come visit one of my favorite cemeteries on the island. This is one of the prettiest cemeteries in Puerto Rico, and the staff here, they do great work maintaining and upkeeping it, and the staff is they're really polite and kind and respectful, and I've had nothing but good experiences walking around this cemetery and speaking with the staff. One of the guys here is really cool, and he remembered me, and I shook his hand when I walked up in here today. And it's really great when a cemetery has kind staff like that. It really just makes all the difference in the world. This is one of the cemeteries on the island that I've been made to feel the most welcome. And generally, I do feel pretty welcome. I rarely encounter hostility when I'm walking around these cemeteries in Puerto Rico. I mean, geez, I've been to 60 cemeteries now, so by the time I'm done with this project and obsession of mine, I think I might be the most cemetery visited gringo and Puerto Rican history, because geez, I've been to so many, and I still plan on going to like 20 more new cemeteries during my trip here this year in 2026, and I'm gonna take you guys along for the ride. I saw the black cat walking around over here, and I want to come up here and see if I can see it again. I don't know if you guys remember the black cat, but I got a really good picture of her like 3 weeks ago when I was here. But she's pretty evasive, and she's on to me now. But she lives here in this cemetery, and sure, she survives off of little lizards, to be honest with you. I was sitting here for about an hour a couple weeks ago just watching her go lizard hunting. If you pay close attention to my videos, you'll see like little lizards walking around on the tombs all the time. And cats here in Puerto Rico, they hunt the heck out of those lizards. It's a good source of food for them. Definitely not the big iguanas, but the lizards for sure. This headstone really got my attention today too. Now that I can, like I said, now that I can relax and just not worry about filming the whole cemetery. Super pretty. Got a couple more amazing headstones up here up front, and then I think I'm gonna be about done with this walk and talk. What are we at now? About a half hour? I'm getting better and better at rambling on, you guys. A couple years ago, I don't think I would have had enough to say to just walk around and keep rambling. Yeah, we got somebody that passed away in 2023 that got put in this tomb. So yeah, people are still getting buried here. Usually with their families that have already got plots here back in the day. Giant tomb. The Familia de Tomas Tolosa. Definitely a prominent family in Mayagüez. Like I said, I am going to go home tonight and research some of these names and see if I can't find out who some of these prominent people are, you guys. And since I may never ever be at this cemetery again in my life, I want to go say goodbye once more to my two favorite statues here. You guys do a bang up job here in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico with your cemeteries. And like I said, I tip my hat off to you guys. Such an awesome freaking statue. So pretty. Gosh, probably so expensive now to get something like this. I couldn't imagine what it would cost to have some of these tombs. Gosh, this has to be like thousands and thousands of dollars now to have something like this. Absolutely freaking amazing. Anyways, you guys, I gotta go home and pack up and get ready to go to the North Coast. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.